My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm the co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture and founder of the Parent Education Series, which I started 16 years ago in the Sequoia Union High School District. We are here tonight with Pamela Estes for a very important conversation on Are My Kids Safe? What parents should know about the online environment. We've been talking about digital media and cell phones and technology for a very long time in this program. But tonight we're really going to be talking about safety, digital safety. And that's something that is, again, very critical for all of you who are parents, really no matter what the age of your child. We know that some of you will have younger kids, some of you will have teenagers, but we know that tonight's advice will be relevant to all of you parents. So again, we really want to welcome you and say thank you to our sponsors, the Sequoia Union High School District, Sequoia Healthcare District, Peninsula Healthcare District, and this program, the Parent Venture. We have with us tonight Pamela Estes, who is from the San Mateo County Human Trafficking Program. I will tell you a little bit more about her in just a minute, but first of all, a few logistics about tonight's format. This is a Zoom webinar, so we have both a chat button and a Q&A button. We would love it if you would put comments and engage with us in the chat. So ask, if you have comments for the panelists, things that you'd like to share, please do that in chat. But questions, we'd like you to put those in the Q&A button. Feel free to add questions during the presentation. I will be reviewing those after Pamela's comments. She's going to be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we will end the program with 15 minutes of Q&A with you, the audience. So please, we welcome your questions and look forward to it. So that is our format. Again, my partner, Paul McCrate, will be handling the chat tonight. And so at the very end, also, you will see a link to a very short survey. We hope you will take 1 minute and fill that out. It helps us with future planning and to give information back to our funders. So again, this event is being recorded, and it will be available soon on our video library, which is a free YouTube channel of the Parent Education Series. We will also be posting that link in the chat tonight, so do check it out. There are other programs on there that you will see about digital media, and this event will be included shortly. Here we go. Tonight's featured presenter is Pamela Estes. Pamela is an attorney who is the Human Trafficking Program Coordinator for San Mateo County. She is a certified human trafficking advocate and sexual assault counselor and a co-founder of Before Our Very Eyes, a human trafficking awareness effort. I became aware of Pamela's work when I started attending meetings of the Human Trafficking Initiative, which is a fascinating group. They host monthly meetings that are online primarily for San Mateo County. So again, thank you so much, Pamela. And tonight's event is Are My Kids Safe? What parents should know about the online environment. Take it away, Pamela.
All right, thank you, Charlene, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk to all of you about this. So I'm going to start to share my slide presentation with you. All right, so are my kids safe? What parents should know about the online environment. So I just want to let you know that this presentation does contain adult content and some images that might be disturbing. So I just wanted to warn you in advance and recommend that you practice self-care and step away if needed. Just to give you some information about myself, as Charlene mentioned, I am an attorney. I'm the co-creator of a human trafficking awareness campaign that was started back in 2015 called Before Our Very Eyes. I am a sexual assault counselor and a human trafficking advocate. I also am a parent, and I'm a parent of a young adult. This topic is of interest to me and been of interest to me for some while because I found it challenging as a parent to navigate the digital world. My husband and I first gave our son a cell phone in 2013. At the time, I feel we were quite naive and uneducated about the door that we were opening to our child. So I know that this is something that everybody has to deal with, and there's a lot more resources out there today than there were perhaps 10 years ago. And so I hope that you'll avail yourself of a lot of the resources, some of which I'll be able to give you tonight. One of the things I want you to know is I'm not an expert on digital devices, on the internet, on social media apps. but I've done my homework, and the internet and digital safety comes up a lot in the topic of human trafficking. So I've done research. As I said, it's very commonplace for traffickers to seek out, groom, and recruit victims online. I'm going to share with you what I've learned. I want to give credit to Shared Hope International. They are an organization that is focused on preventing sex trafficking. They've done a tremendous amount of research. They conduct studies and provide awareness and educational materials on the topic of sex trafficking. So their name and their website is there if you have any interest in following up with the materials that they may have. But Thorn is another organization that does a lot of work around trying to protect children from predators on the internet. And over 50% of the domestic minor sex trafficking victims surveyed in a survey they prepared back in 2018 said they met their trafficker via text or an app or on a website. Technology today is playing an increasing role in the grooming and controlling of sex trafficking victims. And technology, including social media and classified websites, are widely viewed as being responsible for an increase in sex trafficking in the United States. So there's Shared Hope's name again. So before we get started into the in-depth, I wanted to take this opportunity to give you some information about the Human Trafficking Program. Many of you may not even know that it exists. So the program was created in 2015. It is funded by Measure K, and the funding supports 2 part-time contractor positions. We work within the Sheriff's Office, but we take policy and direction from the Police Chiefs and Sheriff's Association. Some of the ways that we work is we help try to help with the response of nonprofits and the law enforcement to human trafficking within our county. We provide training to law enforcement. On request, we'll provide training to agencies, to nonprofits, to other organizations such as schools or any other organization. We've done trainings in the hospitals as well. And we do host a monthly meeting, and it's on the second Tuesday of every month. Anyone is welcome to attend to learn more about the response to human trafficking within our county. So I'm going to also just explain to you what human trafficking is. It's a word that becomes kind of problematic because it can get very confused with people wonder about if it has anything to do with traffic or has anything to do with smuggling. So I want to identify for you what it is. So human trafficking is a crime under federal law, and the federal law is called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It was passed in the year 2000. California has a very similar law that was passed in 2006. So human trafficking is defined in 2 parts. We refer to it as sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So sex trafficking is in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such sex act has not attained the age of 18. So what makes sex trafficking different from many other sexual crimes is that the sex act is commercial. And what makes the sex act commercial is the exchange of anything of value for the sex act. And anything of value can be money. That's probably what most people think of initially, but it could be a purse. It could be payment of a debt, a rent payment. It could be a pair of shoes. It can be food, clothing. It actually can be anything that is of value. If the person performing the sex act is an adult, for it to be the crime of human trafficking, you have to have one of the elements of force, fraud, or coercion. There is one notable exception to this definition. If the person performing the sex act is under the age of 18, there is no requirement to show force, fraud, or coercion for there to be human trafficking. As a society, we do not give persons under the age of 18 the right to join the military, their right to vote, or even we don't hold them legally responsible for contracts. So likewise, we do not hold them responsible for engaging in commercial sex. We hold the person who is facilitating the minor and the person who is buying the sex act responsible. Regardless of how complicit the minor may appear to be, they are not responsible. They are a victim of the crime and they are treated as a victim. With regard to labor trafficking, it is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, slavery. So if force, fraud, or coercion is used to make a person provide labor or services, then that is human trafficking. And you'll notice that within labor trafficking, the force, fraud, and coercion element is required whether the victim is an adult or a minor. If you'd like to learn more about human trafficking, which I encourage you to do, there's a lot of information available online. And Polaris, which is a company that runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they have a new 30-minute video called Human Trafficking 101 that was recently released and would be probably a great resource for those of you who are interested in learning more. So now we're going to turn to the conversation of the hour, the topic of the hour. The primary topics that I'm going to address tonight during our time together is the vulnerability of youth, or vulnerabilities of youth, because there are many, the grooming tactics of predators, warning signs for you to be watching out for as a parent. We'll talk about digital devices and basic safety ideas for consideration. Also, the levels of controls on devices that are available to you, and then sextortion, sexting, and then phishing emails and texts that were sent by pornography sites that seem to be increasing. So for all of time, people have been going to great lengths to keep themselves safe and keep themselves safe and those that they love safe and from harm. In days of old, communities built fortresses with walls and big gates, and people inside were safe. It was a matter of pride to be in a city that was fortified. So during the Trojan War, which some of you may remember from reading in school, the Greeks desired to enter the city of Troy, but it was fortified and difficult to get inside. A Greek king named Odysseus considered how he and his men might get into the city. He came up with a very clever idea of building a great wooden horse and then putting an elite staff of soldiers inside of the horse. After the horse was built, the Greek soldiers left the city of Troy, leading the people inside the city to believe that they had retreated from the fight. And believing that the Greeks had retreated, the Trojan horse was wheeled inside to the city because the horse actually was the emblem for the city of Troy. So they took it in and thought it was basically like a trophy for themselves. But what happened was they opened the gates, brought the wooden horse inside, and the elite force came out and defeated the Trojans. To this day, metaphorically, the Trojan horse is still used to refer to any kind of deception or trick that involves getting a target to willingly allow an enemy into a secure place. In our lives today, we don't act much different than people did long ago. We put locks on our doors to keep ourselves safe and to keep people we don't want in out. We use alarm systems. Some of us even have cams. Some of us even still have walls around our house. But we do still have a Trojan horse, and that Trojan horse is digital devices. So when I was growing up, there were no digital devices. Hope that's not a surprise to any of you. And so there was a public service announcement that came on the television at 10 o'clock every night. And it said, "Do you know where your children are?" And so the assumption was that if you were home, if your children were home, they were safe. But that is not an assumption we can make anymore. Digital devices provide our children and youth with access to a whole world of information, access to adult content, access to inappropriate content, to cyberbullying, to sextortion, and a lot of scary stuff. So I just wanted you to get a perspective on how quickly a lot of this has happened. So in 1991, the internet was publicly accessible. 4 years later, Microsoft released the first version of Internet Explorer. 2007, the iPhone hit the market, which now the internet was available not just from a computer, but it was available from your iPhone in your hand. In 2015, a study was done by the National Center for Educational Statistics, and it was determined that 94% of households with children have a computer in the home, so they have access to the internet. And then 80% of eighth graders used a computer at home, and 80% of eighth graders used a computer at school. So we're just 6 years ahead of the 2015 study, but I'm guessing that those numbers have just continued to increase, especially during the pandemic. In 2019, more than 50% of American children were found to own a smartphone. This was a survey that was done by Common Sense Media. And more than 69% of American children own a smartphone by the age of 12. And 1 in 5 children own a smartphone by age 8. That's the world we live in. So what makes youth vulnerable to the grooming tactics commonly used by online predators? And how do we protect and parent our children from the dangers of the digital world? Well, I think that understanding some of the general truths about children and youth will help us better understand the predators' tactics. Everyone, including you and me, children and youth, we all seek love, we seek acceptance, we seek community. We seek it from our families, from our friends, and even from people outside of our family and friends. And in the preteen and teen years, there are so many physical changes that are happening, mental changes that are happening. And this is when people are going through puberty and they start to seek out romantic relationships and connections with people outside of their family. And children and youth can be very flattered by positive attention that predators give them, never understanding that it's being done with an ulterior motive. And we are all drawn to our digital devices. They deliver an exciting emotional rush every time we hold them in our hands and we get a message from somebody. Youth want to fit in, and if they don't have a tribe, they'll seek it out, and that's natural. So also, youth have a lot of emotional ups and downs. They experience the worst thing ever or the best thing ever, and that can all happen in the same day, and sometimes it can even happen within hours. It's all developmentally appropriate, and it's all part of growing up. Some of the emotions of youth and children can make them magnify the negative things that are going on in their life or the positive experiences they have. It can actually make them feel misunderstood by their family and friends, insecure, lonely, and even in the midst of a very healthy family environment and a child with a great safety net can have all of these emotional ups and downs. Predators understand these vulnerabilities and they seek to exploit them. How do predators operate? Well, for all time, they've gone where the kids are. Children and youth are spending more and more time on devices, doing homework, connecting with friends, playing games. And so that's where the predators are going to. They're only following the kids. And this is especially true because of the pandemic. More and more and more children had access to the internet and longer times of the day, and probably more unsupervised time with the internet. Predators are luring child victims through online communications, through their tablets, through smartphones, through gaming platforms, etc. Predators target youth. They will learn information about them that is used during the grooming process. They will see what the kids are posting on their social media sites, if they have Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook, which most kids don't anymore. That's considered for the old folks. But there's TikTok and so many apps I can't even name, and it's not important because there'll be a new one tomorrow. They post so much information about themselves, their selfies, their pictures of them with their friends. You can see what's in the background, so you get an idea of what their surroundings are like. They'll take pictures with their pets. They'll talk about their favorite food. And so predators who are targeting and looking for youth that are easy to exploit because of their vulnerabilities get a tremendous amount of information online. And we all know that youth today tend to share an awful lot on their public social media apps. So predators groom children and youth, and they are masters of manipulation. They will work to appear familiar and trustworthy. And they try to give this appearance of familiarity by the information that they've already learned on the site. So it's like, oh, I see you like, you like spaniel dogs. I have a spaniel dog. I mean, they probably don't, but they're looking for something to make a connection with the kid. And this, they're relentless. We've been told of situations where someone was reaching out to a young girl for as long as a year. She never responded to him, but something happened in her life fairly traumatic, and she started a conversation with him, and she ended up meeting with him within a week, which was a big problem for her, and unfortunately. And so this also can take a really short period of time. Initial conversations will appear to be innocent because they have to, it's like, putting a fishing line in. You have to put bait out there that's of interest to them. People will comment on the post. They'll send direct messages through the social media apps and gaming consoles, and they'll get their numbers through the friendship, and then they'll start texting them. They'll even send them gifts. You can send an Amazon gift certificate to somebody through a smartphone device. You can buy tokens in those gaming platforms and gift those to kids. And that's happened as well. You name it, it's happened. And after all of this grooming, soon the child thinks that they have a really good friend. Traffickers will use this information to develop a bond between themselves and develop a sense of trust with the victim. They will appear sympathetic and understanding regarding a child's problem. They will act as if they're the only ones who can appreciate them and help them. They'll shower them with compliments. They develop an emotional dependency with them while they're preying on their insecurities. And they'll say things like, oh, nobody understands you like I do, or I know exactly how you feel. That same thing happened to me, or I'm here for you. You won't ever have to feel lonely again. And these kids fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Another tactic that predators use is establishing secrecy, and it's designed to gain the child's confidence. They'll often become dependent on their relationship with the predator. And relationships can many times be interpreted as romantic by the child. This gives the predator the power to control the child's behavior as the online grooming process progresses. So they'll share secret desires and wishes and hopes, and then they'll get the child to share theirs as well, which is just giving them more information to control them. The process will continue, and sometimes it can become sexual. As conversations and relationships progress, the predator will test the child's boundaries. They might expose them to pornography online. They might then ask for nude photographs or video. And now, unfortunately, the child has provided extortion material to this predator. This gives them another way to exert control over the child. Predators will use the secret to shame them, and it also creates a dependence that leads to countless other bad scenarios down the road. Through this continued exposure, the predator is slowly breaking down the child's inhibitions and making certain behaviors that, as a parent, you probably wouldn't approve of become very normalized. And from here, it's often just a very short step from meeting up in person. And the really sad thing about this is all of this happens before they actually have met them in person. Let's consider how people met up before the internet. In the past, predators had to have an in-person encounter with a child or a youth. They couldn't target, they couldn't groom, they couldn't do all of these tactics without actually being physically present with them. That limited the ability for them to connect with a child. The number of children a predator could access was limited by geography and by a child's schedule. They had to be physically in the same space at the same time. And none of that matters anymore. We've had issues where children have been trafficked from one state to another state, from somebody they've been talking to for hundreds and hundreds of miles away. Also, in-person contact is so different from what our children and youth are experiencing when they interact with people online. For instance, children and youth are communicating strictly with words and maybe just images, emojis, whatever. There is no ability for the for the child online to verify the name, the age, anything about the identity of the person they're talking to online. They just assume all of it is exactly what is being told to them. They don't get the benefit of assessing a person and reading nonverbal cues, which are so important. Most experts agree that nonverbal communication is about 70 to 90% of communicating with people. For example, your facial expressions, your eye contact, these are tied to our emotions. And you can read a lot of information about a person and get some really strong impressions about a person by being physically with them and reading their face. You know, the vocal tone, like their speaking tone, their pitch, whether they change their volume, whether they change the pitch, it all gives off important nonverbal cues and information that children do not get online. They're fidgety, you know, if somebody's fidgety, they shake their knee, it indicates discomfort or awkwardness or nervousness. You don't get any of that online. And how we move our head, how we gesture with our hands, it's all important information. Whether somebody stands too close to you, too far away, invading your personal space if they get too close, this is all information with children that children do not get when they're communicating with people online. And so before they've ever had an opportunity to meet somebody in person, they can be incredibly emotionally invested in this idea of who this person is. As the predator, who's usually an adult, attempts to establish a relationship to gain a child's trust, they will many times lie about their own age, or they may even never reveal their own age, even after forming the relationship. And online profiles can be faked and images can be counterfeited. That 14-year-old boy that your daughter thinks she's talking to might not be a 14-year-old boy. It might be an adult male. It's not uncommon for predators to assume other identities in social media profiles, gaming platforms, etc. And many of them are smart enough not to use their own name. They're using other names as well. So what can you do? Your best weapon is information and communicating with your kids. These are very tough conversations. And notice I use the plural conversations. You know, when I was growing up, there was like the quote unquote sex talk. This can't be a single talk. This has to be an ongoing conversation that you keep up with your kids, an ongoing dialogue about digital safety. So every kid is different. And so they need to be respected in the conversation because you're not going to get through to them if you come off in a lecturing mode. You need to think of the word listen and be ready to listen to them and talk to them in a listening mode and not lecturing. At the same time, you want them to know about the dangers and the consequences. So you'll need to actually give them information. But you need to let your children know the realities of what's happening in our virtual and physical communities. Remind them that you are available to talk and that you're interested in helping them navigate confusing conversations and experiences or content without judgment. You have to use a poker face. If your kids are going to open up to you about what they may have already experienced online, if they already have accounts, you're going to be surprised. I promise you, you're going to be surprised at what they've already experienced, what they've already encountered. So you're going to have to not put on that worried face because your kids don't want to worry you. And if they see you get upset and they see you worried about what you're telling them, they're not going to come talk to you anymore. If you learn that your child has done something that you're not happy with, you're also going to have to be really careful not to blame and not to shame. Our kids are going to make mistakes and they need you to be there for them to help them navigate difficult situations. Our kids are not growing up in the same world that we grew up in. One way to get conversation going is just to use everyday situations and shared experiences, like shows that you watch together, or offer to listen to their music so that you know what they're listening to, or watch videos on YouTube. These things can open doors for conversation about what is safe and what is not. I had a friend that when her daughter was a teenager, she would sit down and watch Dr. Phil together, which always gave a tremendous amount of fodder for conversation. So you need to equip yourself to know what to look for if your child might be in trouble. A combination of any of these signs and behaviors could indicate presence of a problem that your child may be communicating with an online predator. Be mindful if they start to withdraw from family or friends. They'll, maybe they're not spending as much time with you. Maybe they're clamming up and not talking to you as much. Just be aware of that. Be mindful if they download pornography. If they change screens or turn off the computer when someone enters the room, or if someone is, it actually can have sight of the screen, that's a big red flag. If they become obsessed with online activity, or if they get upset when they can't be online. Also, if they're receiving phone calls or gifts from older youth or adults that you don't know, or you don't understand the reason for the gifts, or if they're showing up with a second phone or things that, they have things that they can't afford through their allowance or their job. You know your child best. So if you suspect something, I would encourage you to err on the side of caution and consider taking action. Talk to your child first. But if it becomes something you have a hard time understanding how to deal with, don't hesitate to reach out to law enforcement. They can be an additional resource. Or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has a hotline that you can use. They have people who can talk you through situations. They actually also have a cyber tip line. So if you're seeing your child seeing inappropriate content on the internet, you can actually make a tip line there. And then they also have a lot of advice if your child has actually shared explicit images with anyone else, or they've gotten out on the internet. They have tips on how to handle that situation as well. So it is a challenge to keep up with the ever-changing technology. You probably work or have other busy things to do. And I also found this kind of a burden to think about all the different things that we needed to do. But it actually is, it is worth it. Online predators are very aware that technology is always changing. And so they're actually using it to their advantage. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is the website I just showed you, they estimate that online worldwide at any minute in time, there are 750,000 predators online as well. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on online safety and tech device rules, particularly in the household. So there are some basic safety ideas that can be adapted for every family. And these don't require you to understand anything about technology. These are just rules. Set rules that make sense for you and for your family, and rules that you can actually enforce. You're not coming down as a heavy, you're actually showing your kids that you understand there's dangers out there and that you care. Establish tech-free times and tech-free zones in your household. For instance, I think it's really important to not, I'm emphasizing not, allow your kids to have devices in their bedrooms, in the bathroom, or any time behind a closed door. In any place that they have an expectation of privacy, I don't think they should have a device by themselves. This having devices out in the open just reduces the opportunity for them to make a poor choice or a risky decision. I think it's also important to have tech-free time zones in your household, and you can decide whether this is like turning it off at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock, or making sure people don't have devices at the table when you eat dinner. I mean, you have to decide what works for your family. I know a mom who actually turns the router off when she goes to bed. So when she goes to bed, nobody's on the internet. I think it's important to keep all the devices in a central location in the house. And maybe this is a charging station that you set up in the kitchen, or maybe in the parent's bedroom if you feel like the devices need to be farther away from the kids and inaccessible at night. That way you're able to keep up with what devices are actually being used, because you might have different settings on different devices. And the important thing about having the tech-free time and the tech-free zones in the home is that this really reinforces the importance of safety. It reinforces giving your child healthy boundaries from technology. it gives them time to actually explore something else besides their phone and see if they have interests that don't relate to the digital world. And I know that some of these may sound fairly strict, and some of you might be put off using parental controls and settings and putting these rules in place. And I think Common Sense Media actually has a contract that you give, that they recommend you use when you give your child a phone. And if that works for you and your family, I think that's awesome. But many of you also may just be off put by the technology, and it can be kind of a challenge to understand it. But there is an organization called Internet, or a website called internetmatters.org, which will offer step-by-step guides for setting up parental devices that are simple and straightforward. And this can be really effective at reducing your child's risks to the online world. But none of these are 100% foolproof. So there's layers of online controls that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So I know that if you are hesitant to initiate some of these controls for other reasons, I know some people feel like they're violating their child's privacy by putting some of these things together. I'm going to ask you to just think about it in a little different way. Would you give your child keys to your car before they're 16? Would you give them the keys to the car and let them drive for the first time by themselves? Would you give them the keys to the car and let them drive by themselves without taking driver's ed or without taking the state driving test? Would you give your kids the keys to the family car without ever having a conversation about driving or about the car? I think the answer to most of those questions would be no. So driving a car is not a right, it's a privilege. And there are safety measures that people have to take to actually be allowed to drive. California, like every other state, has restrictions in place which limit when we drive, how often we drive, and when teens drive around, who they can drive around with. So they have to wait till they're 15 and a half before they can get a provisional license. They have to practice 50 hours of driving with a parent or guardian. They have to complete the driver's ed class. They have to pass the driving test. And then once they get their license, they're not allowed to drive with friends in the car. They're not allowed to drive between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. There's still many restrictions. So we all recognize that our teens need to practice driving. You need to have conversations with them about driving. Likewise, if your child plays a sport, you wouldn't expect them to be successful at the sport if they never practiced, if they didn't have the right gear, if they weren't coached. So I don't know why we can't look at internet safety and our child's ability to have access to the internet as being similar as these other things that we clearly feel like we need coaching and the proper equipment and boundaries and rules. Your child, we want you to support your child's growing independence and autonomy, but you need to also set boundaries for their safety. Internet access is no different and can be just as dangerous as an untrained person behind the wheel of a car. Understanding the controls that are available to you are a great first step in helping your kids as they learn and grow within the technological world. And all of these things we're going to talk about are not things that you have to keep in place all the time. You know your child, as they grow, mature, they have more experiences, you can always pull back on them. So let's talk about internet providers and routers so that you have the know-how and the tools to best configure network level parental controls and your network's connected devices. So internet providers, or our local area networks, our Wi-Fi, these are all names for the same thing. Likely your kids are connecting in your home more than they are connecting anywhere else to the internet. Whichever provider you might be using, whether that's Xfinity or AT&T or Verizon, there are parental control options available to you, and it's included in your service package. So as your kids connect to Wi-Fi in your home, you have the ability to set digital safeguards. The controls can range from producing website browsing activity reports to limiting screen time to blocking inappropriate sites or inappropriate content. And because there are so many different providers out there, you need to contact your provider directly by website or the customer service line to learn more about the parental controls that they offer and how to use them. Another way to safeguard the internet in your home is through your internet router, which is a device that helps connect or routes the internet signal in your home to all of your connected devices. Most routers have parental control options built right in. And to access these features, you need to know your IP address, internet connection, and your router's login information. Your IP address is available from your computer, and on a PC, you can look up your IP address by clicking on the Wi-Fi icon in the toolbar and then looking for details or setting options. And if you're on a Mac, your IP address is found by clicking your Wi-Fi symbol and then opening up network preferences. Once you find your IP address, you open your web browser, you can paste it into your internet browser, and you'll be able to explore and enable all the parental controls that your router has to offer. If there are features that you don't have on your route or they're not offered by your provider, there are also router add-ons available that are all geared towards kid safety. So some include devices that'll look for cyberbullying and also include predator monitoring services. And a good resource for this is websmart.com. They actually will give you research they've done on product reviews. So parental approval and privacy settings are both good tools to put in place as well. And you may be asking, if I have parental controls on my router, why do I need parental controls on devices? Well, the parental controls on your router only work while your kids are at home. If your kids are walking out of the house with tablets or walking out of the house with phones, then whatever parental controls you put on your router are not going to work. So parental controls on devices travel with the device. So internet devices have parental controls, and there are software tools that will allow you to set controls on your child's internet use. Parental approvals give us the opportunity to see that it'll allow you to see the apps that your children are interested in downloading. It can even send you a message and have you approve any apps that your children are interested in using. And this gives you an opportunity to look at the app, look at reviews about how it's used, talk to your child about how they intend to use it. And so you'll know a little bit more about what they're doing. We do our kids a disservice if we focus only on certain kinds of apps instead of discussing online safety and healthy online behaviors just across the board. Because as I mentioned earlier, the popular app today is not going to be popular tomorrow. There's going to be a new one to take its place. Also, there's something with privacy settings that are very important. They let us focus on things like location settings, allowing your kid to let other people know where they are based on locations, or you can actually monitor who the child can actually communicate with through some of these privacy settings. If the device you're using has an Android operating system, it should have a Google Play app already downloaded on it. And if not, you can download it from the device app store or download your device's app store. Once you find the app, open it, click on the menu on the top left corner, click on settings, and then you'll find parental control options. And for an Apple device, you find your settings app in the device. And once you're in the app, select screen time, and then click content and privacy restrictions to set that up on individual devices. I'm going to show you a video now that hopefully will put this all in perspective for you. It was created by one of the internet safety groups called BARK, B-A-R-K. It's a 9-minute video, but we're just going to watch 6 minutes of it.
I never thought I would be chasing child predators. It was 2 years ago when our team intercepted conversations between a 12-year-old girl and a 40-year-old pedophile. He wasn't just talking to her, he was abusing her, coercing her, collecting images and videos, and no one in her life, her parents, a sixth-grade teacher, her friend, knew what was happening.
Pamela, I think we see that
I have 3 kids, actually, but you don't have to be a parent to be devastated by this. I work for a tech company that uses artificial intelligence to detect issues like grooming and sexual predation, and this is something we see constantly. These abuses are occurring quietly and mostly go unreported, and we want parents to know exactly what we know about what happens online. So we made a plan.
A man has been arrested for allegedly raping a 15-year-old
15-year-old
that he met over Snapchat.
Instagram has become the #1 social media site.
At the top of the free download.
We're also seeing firsthand the predatory symbiotic relationship that exists between Instagram and Snapchat.
We would create a fictitious 15-year-old girl, complete with a believable social media identity, put her online, and document how long it would take for a predator to approach her. But creating a person out of thin air is complicated. We needed photos, but we knew we couldn't use an actual teenager. It would have to be someone on our team. I'm 37, but our graphic designers assured me that with the wonders of photo manipulation, they could magically make me look over 2 decades younger. We bought clothes and accessories, studied body language and facial expressions, and methodically covered with signs of aging, wrinkles, weight shifts, and stretch marks.
Meanwhile, we coordinated with federal, state, and local law enforcement.
Then we built a story around her, a history, a family, a social circle. Livy was born.
All right. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I got a message that you're not seeing the video.
Right. Shall we show just a short video, Pamela, and save some time for questions?
Oh, sure, we can do that. So we'll move along here. I'm going to show you, I'm just going to mention this to you. This was a video that was done by Bark, and it's all very interesting, and I can maybe send the link in the chat for people to look at it later, because it is a YouTube video.
All right. And also, everybody, we will send you the links in a follow-up email, Pamela, because we do want to save a few minutes for Q&A.
Okay, awesome. So the next thing we're going to talk about is sextortion. And sextortion is the threats to expose a sexual image in order to make a person do something. So sextortion is happening with our teens and our kids. Among 39 different studies, it was revealed that 1 of 4 teens admitted to sexting. So it's safe to assume that some of those surveyed did not fess up. Many parents are unaware whether their kids are sexting, whether they're engaged in it. But many teens believe sexting is first base. It's become a normal part of the modern romance. Nevertheless, it's a very harmful practice that leaves many youth vulnerable to dangers. I want to encourage you to discourage your teens from sexting for a number of reasons. Number one, it is a crime. It's illegal. If the sender or receiver of sexual images is underage, they can be charged with the possession or distribution of child pornography. Even if they're both minors, it doesn't matter. And if prosecuted, a sexter can even be required to register as a sex offender. The images also can be shared beyond the receiver. As you all know, a lot of things our kids think are personal or that nobody would ever share, they get shared. Just about every teen that you know will have some story, horror story, about someone at their school or someone in the next town who's had photos of them leaked and sent to countless recipients. This is called revenge porn. There are laws against it almost everywhere in the US, but despite its illegality, there are still websites on the web entirely dedicated to sharing these types of images. Sadly, people take revenge porn even further and use the messages or images to extort the sender into giving them more sexual favors. There's a lawsuit that came out within this last year about a child when he was 13, gave sexual photos of himself to someone through Twitter or through, I think it was a gaming platform, and then those images end up on Twitter. So they were doing that to because the child had stopped sending them photos even after those threats. This is known as sextortion. Unfortunately, these crimes of revenge porn and sextortion aren't just committed by peers, they're also common tools of predators, as I just mentioned in that story. And for all of these reasons, it's imperative that you talk to your children about why sexting is dangerous and is very risky. So there's an organization called Thorn. I used them as a resource or a source earlier, and I mentioned them, but they are also involved in the fight against online predators and sex trafficking. And they have recently done some studies that surveys and found that victims of sex trafficking were 13 or younger when they were threatened. Victims were girls, or 2 in 3 victims were girls threatened before the age of 16. And I apologize, this is just kids who were involved in sextortion. It wasn't sex trafficking. So many of the threats happen sooner for online victims. The first contact is typically by phone, via social media, maybe a friend request. And unfortunately, victims are attempting to address these threats by themselves. That's why it's really, really important for you to open this conversation with your kid so they know that they can come to you if this happens and that you're not going to be shocked. Some victims took steps to prevent the contact, but these threats continued, while others complied and continued to communicate, but threats became more frequent. So it's unfortunate that they found that 1 in 3 victims had never told anybody, largely because of shame and embarrassment. And that's something that you're going to have to realize with your kids. And one of the reasons I advise you to use the poker face is your kids will feel embarrassed. Your kids will feel shame about some of these things that maybe they've engaged in and gotten involved in inadvertently, and you need to be on their side. You need to not shame and not blame. So victims are less likely to report outside of their inner circle. So if you're not open to hearing this and you're not open to discussing this and talking to your kids about it, then it decreases the likelihood that they're going to reach out to anybody for help. So I'm going to go ahead and move along here. Another thing I wanted to talk about was also the email. As soon as your kid gets an email address, there's going to be phishing emails. And people are sending emails all the time, trying to get people to subscribe to their sites, to go to their sites. And this is just an example of some of the emails that have come in. These actually came into a spam folder. So the router threw them into the spam, but they were still accessible in the spam folder. So that's another thing you want to talk to your kids about, is things that go into their spam folder. It's probably better to miss that one valid email than to look at anything in your spam folder. Just delete it. These phishing websites or phishing emails, they are looking to find out if you are a real person. And so if you click to subscribe or click to unsubscribe, now they've got you. They know you're a real person, and the barrage of other emails will just come on top of that. And sometimes the unsubscribe button on these emails is not a real unsubscribe button, and they take you into another place with explicit photos. So I want to just advise you to also be very cautious about your kids' emails account as well. So here's a email or address for an organization called Culture Reframed that has a tremendous amount of really great information for parents, and particularly around talking to your children about pornography that's out on the internet.
Pamela, is that on a slide?
What, Culture Reframed?
Yes. Are you still, we don't see slides right now.
Oh, that's really sad. I'm so sorry. Let me see what's happening here.
That's okay. Also, everybody, we will follow up with some of these links because we know they're important. There it is, Culture Reframed.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I want to thank you so much for listening. I apologize that the video, that you couldn't see the video. We'll get those links to you because I encourage you to follow up and watch them. They're both available on YouTube. Some of them you might want to even view them first, and then maybe depending on what you think about the maturity level of your kids, show them to your children as well, because they're very impactful. And so I just want to thank Charlene and the Parent Education Series again for allowing me to be here tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Pamela. My head is swimming and I do not have a teenager. This is really, this was a tremendous amount of information. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us and staying engaged. We will follow up with some of these important resources because we know you need them. Quickly, Pamela, there was a question from someone who said, can you please repeat the parental control app for Android devices?
All right. Can I go back to the slides?
You sure can.
Slides. Let's see. Let me look at my notes real quick.
And Mary, we can also check this and get back to you. Pamela, why don't I respond to Mary?
Right. Yeah. If she was asking about a particular device, an Android device like the phones, they do have a Google Play app that's already downloaded on the device itself. And if it's not there, you can download it from the App Store. Then you open it, click on the menu button, click on the menu button on the top left corner of the screen, and then click on Settings. And Settings is where you'll find parental controls. So I hope that's helpful.
All right, thank you. Pamela, this is, I think I know what the answer to this will be, but do you recommend that parents let your kids and teens know if you're going to be using some limit setting apps? As our expert Devorah Heitner always says, if you don't tell them and something happens, then you're stuck.
Right. I think it's really important to be just completely honest with your kids about what you're doing. Quite on, and I know it's so much easier if you start off with these limits than having to pull back. I know pulling back and putting limits on a phone that you've already given your child is going to be more difficult, but you'll just need to navigate that as best you can, letting your child know that you're really interested in their health. And with regard to knowing about where they are, et cetera, maybe even having access to their texts. You don't want to comment. You don't want to get involved in their life. You're just there as a safety net. You don't want to take that information and have conversations with your kids about what they're talking to their friends about. You're just there to look at the really scary stuff. So that's one way that you can help protect their privacy, and they'll appreciate it and they'll trust you more if they know that you're not in their business all the time.
Yeah, I know. Some of the greatest advice I ever heard was telling parents, when your kids are young teens and more open, to ask to friend them on Instagram or whatever app they use, and then never appear again. That you can check in every once in a while. And, parents, you can ask to just, let your kids know you're interested in what they're using. What do they like? Why are they using it? But there was a lot of very intense information here. Pamela, I want to also let you just final takeaways for parents that you want them to have tonight before we close.
My final thought is just to reiterate what I'd said earlier. The most important thing is to have a great relationship with your kid and use different opportunities to talk about this often. And as I said, the poker face, you are your child's consultant and you want to be their safe person that they can come to and talk to about these things. And you don't want to be somebody that they're scared to confide in, or be concerned that you're going to be really nervous and worried about them all the time. So it's a really it's difficult to be a parent. Sorry, it's just difficult to be a parent. And hear a lot of these things that you're going to want your child to be able to tell you, but you need to do the best you can there.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for an incredible evening with so much advice. Again, this video will be recorded and available before too long on our video library. Again, big thanks to Pamela Estes, San Mateo County Human Trafficking Program Coordinator. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay well, keep your kids safe, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Good night.